Character design. Is there anything about video games that starts more arguments? While most people are level-headed about this discussion, you usually hear about it from two extremes. People who think character design is the most important thing ever and one mild change will completely ruin everything surrounding it, and people who think that caring about character design is completely stupid, and that their personal preference of not caring about it should apply to everyone, and anyone who cares is an insane person. But personally, I think people should absolutely be able to point out minor flaws in a character design, as long as it's done in a constructive manner, especially when talking about video games. With many video game franchises having gone on for nearly 40 years at this point, the lambuxuacious aspects of these games have honestly changed more than the gameplay, particularly character designs. Now, initially I wanted to do this video looking at character designs for a whole bunch of franchises, and I got kinda far into making it, but I realized I wasn't really making the video I wanted to make, as putting the script into word counters showed me that the video was gearing up to be over an hour and a half long. And that went completely against the chill, casual vibe I wanted to go for with the video. And as much as I would try to keep that intact, people would go in expecting an epic video essay and be very disappointed. So I decided to just salvage the Mario segment since it was the one I had the most fun with and really suited what I wanted to go for. Plus, no one's ever really made a video like this about the franchise alone. Keep in mind though, this was written and recorded under the context of it being a part of a longer video. So I'm not being horribly comprehensive here. Not every Mario character is getting covered. And besides, I don't have much to say about a bunch of stuff like Yoshi's increasing anthropomorphism, and I actually cut out a segment talking about the changes made to Wario after Super Mario Land 2 because I wasn't really saying a lot. I know this isn't the usual kind of video I make, but I hope you enjoy it because I wanted to talk about this. Keep in mind, these are just my opinions, but just because they're just my opinions, that doesn't mean I don't strongly believe in a lot of them. Also, I'm not really an artist myself, this is the best I got, but please refrain from the whole "you don't make art yourself so you can't criticize art" outlook. That would mean most people aren't allowed to have opinions. Just keep in mind I'm more of an admirer of art than someone who is technically proficient myself. Hopefully you gain something from hearing my takes, as I have quite a few unique perspectives to share here. Like I said, this is just meant to be a chill, casual video, so don't expect fancy editing. Let's go. First, let's look at a character who, at the time of me making and releasing this video, was recently redesigned, Donkey Kong. Now, Donkey Kong's original design is pretty straightforward. Big monkey. This was also how he was depicted on the original Donkey Kong artwork, even with the art style switch starting with Donkey Kong Jr. However, after basically going missing for 10 years, when Nintendo wanted a new Donkey Kong game, Rare was up to the task and redesigned the character. It's a good design. They slimmed him down a bit, taking more cues from the cabinet artwork than his in-game appearances, since naturally, as he was going to be playable in his own game, he needed to appear a little more agile. They also gave him a tie, apparently as a way to make him feel more human. This design change could have really messed with the character, but it was implemented very well. Just visually, it isn't distracting at all, and while it adds a bit of human edge to Donkey Kong, he's still characterized as a silly monkey. Now obviously there's a whole thing about this version of the character not being the same as the original, but I'm not really going to get into that. Nintendo, however, wouldn't exactly adopt this design yet, just one that was similar, complete with the tie, in Donkey Kong 94. Which released slightly before Donkey Kong Country. However, after this, Nintendo would adopt Rare's design for Donkey Kong's appearances in other games, seemingly starting with Mario Kart 64. Now, I never thought that this character design looked too terribly out of place with the other Mario characters, but it is pretty clear that he was designed by a much different group of people with different principles than the others, especially in hindsight with this redesign. But they kept using this design for over 30 years until they decided to redesign him for Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. This redesign is actually pretty good. Now that we're past the limitations that necessitated Donkey Kong be put on a diet, he's a much bigger boy again. And there are other subtle changes and stuff like the face. It's closer to his original design and his look in the Mario films, but they still keep some of the elements from the Rare design like his basic head shape and tie. Overall, it looks pretty good and is very tasteful, especially given how disastrous redesigning a character who's essentially looked the same for 3 decades could have been. He looks more in line with the rest of the Mario cast now. One redesign is a bit more controversial though, and that's Diddy Kong. Diddy Kong himself started out as a controversial redesign. He was originally supposed to be Donkey Kong Jr., however Nintendo felt the design change was too drastic and they just told Rare they could make this character design into an original creation if they wanted. This meant that Donkey Kong Jr. was never redesigned, and since he never appeared in the Donkey Kong Country series, whenever he reappeared, Nintendo just lazily used an approximation of his old design that looks really out of place next to the new Kong designs, especially given the weird timeline implications. Hot take, but Donkey Kong is more confusing than Metal Gear. Anyways, Diddy Kong received a redesign to go along with Donkey Kong's new one, and it looks alright from a distance, but they separated his eyes, yet the separation is so thin it makes me wonder why they even bothered. It looks drawn on. Weirdly, some of the more recent 2D artwork still features him with the Una eye, so I don't know what's going on. That being said, I don't want to dwell on this too long. We need to see more of him to fully grasp this redesign, and I don't want to date this video too much with these observations, so let's move on to talk about Pauline. Pauline has probably had the biggest design change of any Mario character. Her original in-game appearance looks very 18th century, if that makes any sense, with her long dress and ponytail. She also starts the long line of Mario women being taller than the men, and her proportions are clearly inspired by the character that Shigeru Miyamoto clearly based her on, Olive Oil, who's also very tall and lanky. However, actual artwork from Donkey Kong depicts her a bit differently. In the Japanese art, she has a more modern appearance, but what I really like is her American design. And it seems Nintendo did as well, as when she reappeared in Donkey Kong 94, her design was obviously inspired by it, or at least I'm going to claim it is because it looks like it. However, with Princess Peach now being the franchise's main blonde, not that that stopped them later down the line, they redesigned Pauline to be a brunette. This 2D art was pretty much translated perfectly into her appearances in 3D and has been her design ever since. But a younger Pauline appears in Donkey Kong Bonanza. I was going to complain about how this design looks very obnoxious, but then I thought about it, and ever since Donkey Kong Country, the Donkey Kong series has kind of always had obnoxious or questionable character designs, so this isn't anything new. She fits right in line with Funky Kong and Chunky Kong with her hella hip fashion sense, fam. It's not too bad. Honestly though, I've never been the biggest fan of Pauline's design. She definitely stands out from the princess characters with her more modern attire, but I actually would kind of like to see them make a design more based on her original sprite art appearances. I don't know, I just think it would be interesting. Of course, I don't hate her design, I'm just not really a fan. Okay, I guess to complete the original Donkey Kong trio, let's round it off by talking about Mario himself and then transition into the wider world of Mario characters. But honestly, Mario has so many appearances, I really just don't feel the need to talk about him. He's pretty much looked the same since 1988. I guess I can talk about the differences between his 3D designs. His Nintendo 64 era design is obviously very primitive looking, but still charming. Even his in-game appearances. His most used design from the GameCube to Switch eras is obviously classic, and his current appearance, which really isn't that different from what Nintendo's been using for the past quarter of a century, is pretty good, emphasizing his cartooniness just a little bit more. I like it. Though I will say, and this doesn't have anything to do with the design itself, during the GameCube era, Nintendo was doing this weird thing where they tried to give Mario these serious expressions or attitude or whatever they were trying to convey. Yeah, they were like 10 years late, but while these look kinda cool, I will admit it's a little too obvious what they were trying to do. Actually, I guess you could say during the 2000s, Mario and Sonic's, I won't say their entire personalities, but certainly their outlook on their adventures felt like they had swapped from the 90s. Like, Mario is usually happy-go-lucky and doesn't take serious situations too seriously unless it gets really serious, while Sonic used to take serious situations super seriously and is very determined to put a stop to them, but he's usually a pretty happy and chill guy. Though Sonic honestly never changed back. Before Mario had leaped into the third dimension, however, his 2D design had been pretty consistent thanks to the excellent and wonderful artwork by Yoichi Kotabe, who left Nintendo in 2007, though you honestly probably couldn't tell, as his legacy has been carried on by Shigehisa Nakaue, who closely follows his style. Yeah, this is obviously the best these characters have ever looked. But what about before Kotabe stepped in? Well, Mario's initial designs on the Donkey Kong art look like pizza mascots. Also, you can clearly see the Popeye inspiration in this design, something that I really like, and has pretty much been completely wiped from the design since Donkey Kong. But I understand why they did it. Also, Mario's overalls, up until Super Mario Bros. 3 where they were swapped, were usually depicted as red with a blue shirt. Yeah, it looks kinda weird, but there's a charm to it. It makes him pop out and look more colorful. Of course, this would differ depending on sprites. My favorite Mario sprite is easily the Super Mario Bros. 3 design. I love the dot eyes that clearly inspired the design of Paper Mario and the black overalls. That being said, I really briefly want to talk about two strange design details in his Super Mario Bros. Sprite. His overalls really look like they could be an enemy in Galaxian, and he clearly has a mullet. That is hilarious to me. Also, his in-game appearances up to Super Mario World are much closer to his look in the Donkey Kong art, which is strange, as Super Mario Bros. Would basically create his modern design before it was fully codified by Kotabe. However, after Donkey Kong, the Black Void era of Mario games had this weird art style starting with Donkey Kong Jr. and including Donkey Kong 3, Mario Brothers, and Wrecking Crew. It's unknown who did this artwork, but it's rumored to have been Yoshio Sakamoto? Okay. Weirdly, in the Mario Brothers art, he's depicted with a blue hat, and his overall and shirt combo is actually what it would come to be half a decade later. I really wish we could see an actual game in this art style. It's fantastic and it just pops out. Honestly, the Black Void era of Mario games is very interesting just because of how different it is from the Super Mario we would all come to know, with its more grounded contemporary settings, but I should really move on to talk about Green Mario. Or Luigi, as some apparently call him. Yeah, for the longest time, Luigi was just a green Mario, even in the Mario Brothers artwork. That would of course change with the release of Famicom Grand Prix 2 3D Hot Rally in 1988, which depicted him as being a little bit taller and slimmer than his brother. Though technically the 1986 Super Mario Bros. OVA depicted him like this earlier, but it doesn't count, it's not a game. I really like this design choice, especially since these slim and fat duos usually depict the slim one as the main one. But Luigi got it bad. He didn't even get any artwork for Super Mario Bros. Or its Japanese sequel, despite, the names of the games. There's certainly a Super Mario on the cover, but where's the brother? After the release of Famicom Grand Prix 2, Luigi would appear in Super Mario Bros. 2 USA, with his in-game design resembling that of his artwork. And then Super Mario Bros. 3 came out a few weeks later and merely depicted him as a palette-swapped Mario again, despite his design and artwork being solidified. This would continue into Super Mario World. However, with the release of Super Mario All-Stars and its remade versions of Super Mario Bros., The Lost Levels, and Super Mario Bros. 3, they had finally decided to go back and give Luigi, or at least Super Luigi, his own sprites rather than making him a mere sprite swap of Mario. And when the collection was re-released with Super Mario World, they even went back and did it for that game. Now it seems that since then, Luigi's design has been solidified and has followed the progression of the rest of the franchise's characters. But, well, let's just say Luigi had a rough transition to 3D. Not that his in-game models from the N64 era look bad, those look fine, but his renders, what happened? It seems that Nintendo was trying to make Luigi look even more distinct from his brother and thus decided to increase the size of his eyes, an idea that I can somewhat get behind, but the execution makes Luigi look strange. But since then, he's looked pretty good. Speaking of Nintendo 64 era character designs, what was going on with Bowser? Actually, the reverse situation from Luigi applies here. He looks excellent in renders, but look at this doofus. The contrast between how intimidating he is vast. However, it's not as bad as his sprite in Super Mario Bros. Look at this. What were they trying to convey here? He looks so goofy. And this brings me to Super Smash Bros. And Giga Bowser. See, Smash creator Masahiro Sakurai has his own ideas on how the character should be portrayed, and I kinda respect it. Sakurai created Giga Bowser to show the world his vision for his ideal version of Bowser, as he always viewed Bowser as a very intimidating and fierce creature, and dislikes how after the first game, they started portraying him as a goofball. Here's the thing though, where the hell did he get this idea from? This is not intimidating. That is clearly a goofy smile. Maybe he got the idea from the cover art. I actually really like this version of the character on the cover art and his color scheme. But he's still kinda too cute to be threatening though. For the most part though, outside of these exceptions, Bowser usually looks the same. And I'll also admit that I actually kind of agree with Sakurai a bit there too. While I don't think he was ever portrayed as particularly intimidating, I think he can be way more effective portrayed as more intimidating. The only time he's really visually intimidating outside of Smash is, hilariously enough, Baby Bowser from Yoshi's Island. Actually, I guess I should mention this. I didn't really talk about the Smash versions of the other characters because, well, I'm already talking about enough designs as is, so of course I'm gonna leave some stuff out, like Super Mario RPG, whose art style I'm quite fond of, but I don't have much to say about. That being said, I will comment on Melee and Brawl's art styles for a bit here. Instead of changing character designs to make them fit together better, they just use their basic designs but with these realistic textures slapped on to add a sense of cohesion. Of course, after that, they kinda just stopped caring about making everything look cohesive. The only time Smash has looked remotely cohesive was with the first game's 2D artwork, but even then, the characters just look weird with each other. Mainly because of stuff like how Mario and Luigi's proportions are, and they could have changed other humanoid characters like Link to have similar proportions, which had been done before, but instead, they insisted on using his current design, which, to be fair, given how little faith Nintendo had in this game, they probably didn't have the resources to care. Anyways, let's move on to talk about Peach. On the Japanese box art for Super Mario Bros., she looks kinda like she does now, the biggest difference being that she's really small. I wonder if she was originally meant to have similar proportions to Mario, but I'm glad they kept up the thing they started with Pauline. But even in game, she's small. Oh god. Peach looks terrible in the first game. Aside from the fact that she looks nothing like her artwork, are those her lips or her open mouth? Why is her face shaped like a pear? I guess if I had something nice to say about it, I do like the color scheme, and Nintendo would later use it for Fire Peach, so that's cool. They redesigned her sprite in the Lost Levels, and it looks better, but it still keeps the same color scheme. This seemingly served as the basis for her appearance in NES Tetris, weirdly, considering that game only released in the West and the Lost Levels only released in Japan. In Super Mario Bros. 2 USA, she looks more like herself, but her hair is brown. Since then, her design has pretty much never changed. Weirdly, her design in Mario Kart 64 really looks like her design in Super Mario RPG for some reason. But it's clearly just a coincidence. Overall, Peach's design has been pretty good ever since. Now let's talk about the final and one of the most controversial Mario design changes, Daisy. When Daisy was first introduced in Super Mario Land, she basically just looked like Princess Peach with a different color. Weirdly, they kind of implied that she was much smaller, both in-game and in this artwork, and not the taller Pauline-like figure Peach had already become and she would soon become. They kinda tweaked her design a bit for NES Open Tournament Golf, making her taller, but she really received her biggest design change when she transitioned to 3D with Mario Tennis. In renders, she's depicted with darker skin than the other human characters. But starting with Mario Party 4, they changed her skin color to be much lighter, and she was given this weird squishy face, something that would change as she transitioned into the Wii era. This is a very controversial change, with some even accusing Nintendo of being racist. I don't think that's what happened, but it is kind of strange that they changed this, especially since it really helped her stand out, and for this reason, I really like the browner skinned Daisy, and like many, wish they would bring the design back. But I even prefer the other details from this design, like the darker hair, different dress details, and especially the less goofy looking facial structure. Now, some people have said that her tan skin was an intentional choice made because she's the princess of a desert kingdom, but this isn't true. Sarasa Land isn't a desert, and this misconception comes from the fact that Super Mario Land's first world is a desert. Overall, I think most Mario characters have good reasons for being redesigned, and while I do find charm in a lot of these older designs and do wish they could return in some form, they're usually changed for good reasons. The only change I find a little questionable is Daisy, as there was nothing wrong with her N64 era design. That's all I have to say about Mario characters, since most other characters, especially the species characters, haven't really changed much design-wise. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know if you want more like this. If you want to see the only other segment I edited for the original longer all-encompassing version of this video, check out the bonus video I left in the description. Thank you to my patrons, thank you for watching, and feel the sunshine.